This is Rachel Dworkin from the Chemung County Historical Society. Today is October 29th, 2021, and I am here reporting for the COVID Memory Project. I am speaking with
Karen Cromer, the Executive Director at the Clemens Center.
All right, thank you, Karen. So we last spoke the summer of 2020 about how things were going at the Clemens Center during the COVID pandemic. Can you give me a quick timeline of what has happened at the Clemens Center since then?
Well, we were eagerly awaiting the waves of reopenings because New York State opened the very least populated events and venues first, but those that they considered, less likely to transmit the virus. So low attendance, or you could socially space people, and they kind of opened things up over periods of 6 to 8 weeks in kind of 2-week increments to see how things were going. And we were eagerly waiting last summer, when are they going to announce that large venues such as ours, we have 1,600 seats, but we were awaiting, that progress of that, and it never happened. We waited and waited through the fall. We thought, well, if they're not reopening us now, we will plan. We have to do something. We have to plan for spring of 2021. Let's put out a series of programs. Let's plan for spring 2021. And that came, and still no reopening of large venues such as ours because of the concern of having so many people gathered inside. And at that point, there was no vaccine. There was no way to protect people other than masks and social distancing. So we booked everything. We had everything in the queue, and then found out by the end of the year, this just wasn't going to happen. So again, we had to reevaluate what we were doing, come up with plan B, plan C, plan D, and punted everything into this fall. Luckily, early in the spring, they were able to roll out a vaccine. People were greatly encouraged to take advantage of that. Now here we are, midway through 2021, they finally announced that big venues such as ours can reopen. And they kind of just said, open your doors and do it. There were few restrictions. And that, again, was a surprise to us. So we've been following best practices. We were able to open and have a couple of events in July, about 100 people each for some chamber music events. And quite honestly, we weren't prepared for that reopening. We had let our employees go. They were furloughed. Some of them found employment elsewhere. And to just say to a large venue, you can reopen now, does that mean you're ready to do so? So it put us in a very awkward position. Now here we are, fall 2021. We are back open. We are fully staffed. And we have had some successful Broadway events with 800 to 1,000 people. So very proud of being able to make that happen. But it's been very difficult. The communication from the government on what we're allowed to do and how to do it has been very tricky.
Okay, so you have two theater spaces. You have the Powers Theater, which seats what, like you said, 1,600, and then you have the Mandeville Hall, which is a black box theater that seats how many?
150.
Are you using Mandeville Hall?
Right now, we are using it for pop-up COVID testing of our local labor that are coming in to mix and mingle with the national touring Broadway production. So we want to test them, make sure they're safe, And we do a health screen every morning when they come in. So that space is actually being used as a testing spot.
Okay, so that sort of ties into what you were saying about best practices. What are you guys doing to protect your staff, your visitors, and the touring companies?
We're following best practices in the industry, listening to what governments were and the CDC were saying about air filtration. So that was the first layer. They required what are called MERV 13 filters to be put in all the HVAC. So we have tougher filters now. And they're supposed to be the best standard for preventing the spread of disease. So those have been implemented. We have misters that spray antiviral substance, so that, and they've been demonstrated on airlines and other industries where it just sprays the area. It's, as I understand it, a peroxide that's used to kill the virus. And then we've also been, masking, gloves, social distancing, wiping down, cleaning. We've got hand sanitizer stations throughout the building. Just following all the practices that we have come to learn and adopt over the past 19 months.
So I know a lot of Broadway shows on Broadway are requiring that people have proof of vaccination before they can come into the theater. Is that something that you guys are doing?
We have not adopted that practice here. The decision was made by the Broadway theater owners in Manhattan to go that step because of two reasons. One, most of their patrons come from other places. They're visitors from other states or other nations coming into New York City as tourists. So they've got a lot of visitors that are not from New York City. And they also have very small square footage in their theaters. So they are really literally packed in like sardines. If you've sat in a theater, you're not as comfortable as you are here at the Clemens Center. You're literally squished. So those were two reasons why they went to that practice right away. There has been a lot of resistance within this area to getting the vaccine. It's challenging. People are still very against it and feel it's a personal decision. And so we knew that our demographic of Broadway attendees might be resistant to us requesting that. And we had already sold the Broadway subscription series to hundreds of people. So to come back and say, well, now you can't come unless you're vaccinated would be somewhat of a slap in the face to people who already invested and were willing to come. So because the government wasn't requiring it, we are requiring masks for anyone, regardless of vaccine status. And that's as far as we've gone right now.
Okay. What are you doing? You said you were bringing in local labor. Can you tell me a little bit about how that normally works and how it's working currently?
We are part of the local stagehands union, Local 289. And when a Broadway show comes in, they need additional help. They don't travel with everybody that's needed to put the show up and take it down and to run the performances. So they usually hire 40 or 50 local people to come in to help with unloading trucks, putting up the set, focusing the lights, getting everything ready. Then they dismiss all but what are needed for the show call, which could be 8 or 10 or 12 people to run the cues for the show. Then they bring back 30 or 40 more people at the end to load everything out. And that includes hair and wardrobe as well. People to help get the actors dressed and out on the stage.
So these folks, that's not like steady. That's not a steady paycheck. That's a per diem kind of deal.
Yes,
Okay. And so you are currently testing them to make sure that they're not sick before they come in each day. You were saying?
correct. The Broadway touring industry has put out guidelines for what they would like to see the venues do to ensure their safety, because of course they're going from point to point to point. And they have all adapted and brought on board a COVID specialist that's traveling with them.
Mhm.
Likewise, our venue has hired a COVID specialist. She happens to be a licensed practical nurse, and she is communicating directly with their COVID specialist to ensure that our practices are meshing correctly and that we're comfortable on each side, that everyone's making the best effort to mitigate the disease. So we hired her to come on board just before the first Broadway performances. And she's the one that's helping with this pop-up testing in Mandeville Hall. And this is new and different for us. We had to become very aware of what the difference is between rapid test or a PCR. They're having actually the stagehands that come in show proof of vaccine and or a negative test prior to working. They get a rapid test that morning when they first come in. And then as they're taking the rapid test, they're also doing the PCR, which is sent out to a lab. And 2 or 3 days later, we get the results. It's a more stringent test and it's more accurate. So then we have a rolling 7-day average on all those people that have been here. And the show is actually right now here doing a technical rehearsal. They're here for 3 weeks. And Broadway League has asked that their productions test everyone now. It started at 2 times a week, now we're up to 3 times a week because of the transmission rate in this area.
Have you had anyone who's come in to work test positive?
No.
That's good. So you were saying that you had let go all of your, or most of your previous staff, and that you've rehired to reopen the house and hired this new position. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of getting the workers back? How many of them, were still willing to come back to work? How did that go?
We started with 15 full-time and 3 part-time, and we're back to 17 all in. What happened was some people quickly saw that this was going to stretch longer than they were comfortable, despite the fact that there was additional funding for those that were on furlough through workman's comp or through unemployment. That was just not working for them. A lot of people just want to work. They don't want to sit at home and collect a check. So several people left our employment out of their own choice. Some people, it just made sense because there was nothing for them to do for us to just let them go. It was a time to make transitions and change within our organization. Let's review, okay, what do we have left as far as staff? So we made some decisions there as well. And we just brought back the COVID specialist, and then we had 3 other hires, which was challenging now in this environment. Employees are demanding more since they've been off, since they were able to get higher wages. They're demanding better conditions, and we had to do some stealthy negotiation on some of these employees. But we've got 4 great people that have come in and joined our team. So we're very enthusiastic about these folks that have come in.
So you've got 4 new employees, and everybody else is an old employee who's come back?
Right.
Okay. So how many of the people that you had previously employed chose not to come back?
Well, we had one come back for a short period of time and then had a better offer elsewhere. So that was a surprise to us. So that was a position that we then immediately needed to fill.
So what kind of work do these folks do at the Clemens Center? Like, what types of jobs are there?
The employee that came back after furlough and then left after about 6 weeks or 8 weeks was our director of development. So that's a position needed to hire right away. That's a key position in upper management here. We also had our front of house, our guest services manager, and a concession manager that we had to fill.
Okay. And so you've got people who are doing fundraising, people who are doing ticket sales, people who are doing, what does the front of house do? Are they like
managing all of the ushers, the usher corps, and also some of the catering, the merchandise sales, security, that kind of thing.
So your usher corps is primarily older volunteers. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
How had the pandemic affected them and their willingness to be out in public ushering?
Well, it's kind of split. I think we've had maybe 60% willing to return. They're vaccinated. They're willing to put on a mask. They're ready to do anything. They maybe were a little stir crazy at home, ready to get out, see their friends again, and be in this environment. Other people are reluctant because maybe they have underlying health issues, additional concerns. You know, we know that despite being vaccinated, that you could carry the virus or transmit it, you know, and have a breakthrough illness. So some people are still hesitant to come back.
So you said most of your ushers are vaccinated. Is that a requirement for participation, or is that just something that they mostly did themselves?
We've required that of our volunteers, knowing that they are of an age, and we want to be especially careful with them.
Is the regular staff also required to be vaccinated?
We have required anyone that's public facing to be vaccinated.
There are concessions in front of house.
Right. There are office workers that are not yet vaccinated, but we are at about 80 to 90% vaccinated.
Okay. Is there anything else about the operations under COVID that you can tell me about?
It's been a stress, as you can imagine, for all of our staff to adapt to these new protocols, to think through and plan ahead for the local labor that comes. They maybe don't all come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Maybe the wardrobe folks come at 3 in the afternoon. So we have to be prepared to test a couple times a day and plan that accordingly. And just the communications, our marketing department has had to step up and be sure that we are communicating all the protocols to our audiences, that we have incorporated a mask icon on our e-blast to remind people this venue is requiring masks. And, you know, everything is subject to change. Dates and times of programs are always something we have a disclaimer, subject to change. But now we're also saying protocols because things change so quickly from week to week. And we get different advice from the CDC, from the Department of Health, from New York State. We're trying to follow everything to the T and, you know, provide a safe environment for everybody. So far, so good. We're very proud of our track record.
Okay. Have you had any issues with the public regarding the mask mandate? And we've had some pushback here over time. Is that something that's happened at the Clemens Center?
We had an event here with Teresa Caputo, the Long Island medium. And she actually brought in her own security crew. They had, because she's a high profile person and has a lot of big fans, so they had extra security. and they were at the doors checking in bags, for weapons and that kind of thing. And I know that there were a few people that arrived that refused to put on masks, and they were turned away. They were asked not to come in because hard to fight that big security detail. We have been at the doors for our shows, handing out masks when we see someone walking up that doesn't obviously have one in their hand, providing one to them, reminding people, sometimes they let them slip, just making a simple gesture to remind them, put it back over your nose too. It seemed to work well. We didn't want this to be confrontational with anybody. We didn't want our, again, ushers of a certain age to have to confront and forcibly remove anyone. That's not what we're about. We're hoping that peer pressure will do the work for us. Everybody else has a mask on. They are in compliance. We ask that you do the same. So we don't want it to be ugly. There's no reason to make it so. There have been a few times people have grumbled about it. We've asked our ushers to go in pairs. If they see somebody that's out of compliance, talk to them as a pair rather than one-on-one. And you usually get them to turn it around right there.
Okay. So you see 1,600 folks. You were saying that you're getting between 800 and 1,000 at the shows. Are you able to actually turn a profit with those numbers?
We're able to do okay. We're able to cover most of our expenses. But no, Broadway is predicated on full attendance. 100% capacity is needed. These shows are very expensive. So in order to continue on, we need to have near full houses to make it. We can't be profitable because we're a nonprofit organization, but we'd like to do better than just break even.
Okay. So is the reason why your attendance is not at full capacity because of COVID protocols or just reluctance of the public to be in public?
I think it's a combination of things. Traditionally, the first subscription shows of the year are lower, have a lower attendance. So we know that right off the bat. The first show out of the gate was An Officer and a Gentleman. That's a movie title. People don't know this as a musical show. I think that also counted against us. And it was the first time this show had ever played. So people haven't heard about, you've got to go see An Officer and a Gentleman. And it was also very warm that weekend. So it was in the 70s. I think people are still out enjoying the warm fall weather and just haven't clicked over to, it's time, it's cool, it's time to go in for entertainment. So I think those three factors, along with, we're still in a high transmission rate area. During those performances, we were between 10 and 12% transmission rate for Chemung County, which was one of the highest in New York State. So I think all of that combined to soften our sales. We were proud to have a half a house for 2 performances back to back. And again, have not had any fallout from that. So we have not had any comments or concerns that mass assembly caused any transmission.
Okay. So what is your season for this year? Officer and a Gentleman aired or premiered when?
That was October 15th and 16th.
Okay. And what's coming up for the rest of the year?
Well, next weekend, we have a special attraction. It's one night only of Oklahoma, which came right in on the heels of An Officer and a Gentleman to also do a technical rehearsal. Officer was here for about 2.5 weeks. Oklahoma was here for about 3.5. And then we've got a little lull until Waitress plays November 30th and December 1st. And then we have some holiday shows. Local organizations will play here, including the Orchestra of the Southern Finger Lakes and Raphael Gregorian Ballet Theater. So they'll do their Nutcracker. So we're looking forward to those holiday shows for the community. And again, we will maintain those same Broadway standards. We will do testing and health checks and masks, all of that for these performances. Then we flip into the spring and we've got Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, South Pacific, and Cats to round out the subscription. Then we've got 2 carryover shows from 2020. So we're still picking up shows that didn't get to play. So they're still coming back to us. Riverdance and Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay. So that's quite the lineup, and that's going to be in the spring of 2022, barring no further catastrophes.
Correct.
So you have a couple of resident companies, or you had a couple of resident companies, including the Elmira Little Theater, and they normally operated out of Mandeville Hall. So they're currently out of the Park Church, correct?
They chose to go elsewhere. We had offered them about 39 dates in our calendar that they weren't happy with. They typically would be here when those Broadway productions were teching. So that was the calendar that they wanted. We didn't have that available. We offered them an alternative. They chose not to take those dates and to play elsewhere.
So how would that, so going forward, do you still hope to work with them if and when you no longer need Mandeville Hall for mandatory COVID testing?
Yes, absolutely. And they actually have time in our calendar in the spring.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, unless there's anything else you want to talk about relating to Clemens Center, how has COVID been treating you in your personal life? Has anything changed significantly since we last talked?
I'd say we are steady as it goes. There was a period of time where out in public you felt comfortable or more comfortable going without a mask. I think that changed heading into the late summer and early fall. So my husband had a stroke a year ago. So I know he is vulnerable. So I'm very careful about where I go, what I do, who I see. Certainly I'm getting tested here because I might mix and mingle with the national tour. So having that reassurance kind of at work, I'm getting a test and I know I'm good. I'm not taking anything home to him. So in that way, you're just more aware of what's going on. And certainly washing hands, sanitizing more often, and just thinking about what you're touching, where you've been, not sharing food or drink anymore. That it was fun, people would bake at home and bring things into the office, and we just don't do that anymore. It's curtailed some parties and some events that might have otherwise been, gangbusters and lots of food and drink everywhere. Wearing a mask curtails concession sales considerably, as you can imagine.
Has your husband, is he okay? Is he recovering?
He's doing pretty well, yeah. He's a fairly young man when the stroke hit. He was 48. So kind of surprising, but the doctors tell us that's happening to younger and younger people. And he has not regained full use of his left hand, but he's up and able to walk, and his speech recovered pretty quickly. So there are some long-lasting effects as far as his stamina, but other than that, he's doing pretty well.
That's good to hear. You're worried about giving it to him. Have you both been vaccinated?
Yes, we both have. And he should be eligible for a booster because of his condition. So we're waiting to get word on that.
Okay. Who is paying for the work COVID test that you are doing? I imagine that that's going to get pretty expensive.
We have engaged with a company called City Testing Centers, and they are connected with North Shore Laboratories, and they are offering the testing free of charge to us. The funding is coming from the American Rescue Plan, so it's federally funded.
Okay. And how about all those changes to your HVAC system and the spritzer system that's spraying disinfectant? Imagine that also cost a good deal of money.
That is on the Clemens Center. We fortunately received a small business administration grant called the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, and that has helped us make those kinds of payments.
Okay. Going forward, you're going to have to presumably keep all of that, as part of your system with the higher grade filters that you're going to continue to be using and the sprits that you're going to be continuing to maintain even when you get out of COVID because you've made those structural changes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How about fundraising? I know last year you had done an online fundraising event that you told me about. Have you had any luck fundraising this year?
We continue to have great support in the community. We have annual memberships that renew throughout the year, and people have been extra generous with those memberships. Some cases doubling or tripling what they would normally give, which has surprised us a great deal. We did lose quite a few business members. We have a lot of restaurants, for example, that are part of our business membership. And so they had dropped off because they were in dire straits with no patrons in their restaurants. So we're slowly picking them up, and now we have a new person on board as the director of development, and she's already out pursuing people that we've lost, and then picking up new business.
Okay. Anything else you think we should be talking about?
I think that about covers it. It's been a long haul, what we call a very long intermission for the Clemens Center. And we actually did the calculation. We were closed down in effect for 498 days between performances. That's a long time.
Yeah, that is a very long intermission. All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking with me.
You're welcome. Thanks, Rachel.